this is one thing that I think it was really emphasized to me, this intellectual self-defense thing. We'll, flesh it out here in a little bit. Dylan's developed a new angle in approaching intellectual self-defense with the main goal of addressing how to give potent, practical methods of defending yourself from manipulation with the least amount of time and effort possible. Dylan is also the vice president of the newly formed Washington Systemic Policy and Learning Systematic. What did I say? Okay. Systematic Policy and Learning Center, Washington SPLC, and board member of the American Social Science Association. All right. So what are we going to talk about? I would imagine what I keep hearing associated with you is this intellectual self-defense. And what I want people in the audience to understand what it is you're advocating, what we're going to be talking about, because this is kind of like a commercial, on the network show that will go up on the affiliates tomorrow night. And I want to encourage them to go and listen to the full podcast here, because there's a lot of things that I want to talk about with you and share and bring in as part of the conversation, but I won't be able to do the whole show. So go ahead and, entice us here. Go, Dylan.
Excellent. So we should start by asking what exactly is intellectual self-defense. And I would suspect that you and your listenership are at least vaguely aware of it, because I originally bumped into the concept by listening to Peace Revolution podcast by Richard Andrew Grove. And I know you're on each other's shows, at least occasionally. Yeah. Right. I mean, I don't know.
Well, these guys that, that encouraged me having you on, that's, what they have in common. Their common thing is they're autonomy grads,
Exactly.
Which is Richard Grove's thing. So all of a sudden, did you do autonomy? Are you part of that? Or is that how they know you?
I'm part of it.
They just...
I was a late, I've been listening to Peace Revolution podcast since 2010 or something like that. But I was a pretty late comer to autonomy.
Okay. So that's a common thread.
Yes.
It usually begins with, Ayn Rand or Richard Grove or James Corbett or something. I mean, it's kind of, so that's kind of the, the mindset that we're in. Okay, cool. That's good to know. All right. Yeah, Richard Grove's a good friend. Right. Yeah, he and Lisa, favorite people.
So,
and Luke, his little boy. All right. So go ahead. Intellectual self-defense. Go.
Yeah. So if you were to go to Peace Revolution podcast and look up intellectual self-defense, you'll probably bump into something called the trivium, and you'll walk down the road of formal logic and learning your fallacies and understanding syllogisms and all this sort of stuff. And all that is very, very good and very, very important. But I spent some time studying it. Well, I think I spent a lot of time studying it. And as I was going through it, and I felt like I was part of this community within Peace Revolution podcast at the time that was going through learning this stuff at the same time, and we were all kind of practicing this stuff together, was I ascertained that there is a massive, massive gap, a huge piece missing out of the conversation. And I also ascertained that if you get there's a book, The Trivium, that goes over the classical, the liberal arts the classical liberal arts, to have this right, of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. It is like torture chamber, medieval, boring, right? I mean, rubbing glass, broken shards of glass in your eyeballs, awful in terms of you really want to learn this? Okay. And if you want to engage in intellectual self-defense, there's this formal process of okay, let's learn grammar, let's learn logic, let's learn the trivium, let's learn your fallacies, let's learn the syllogisms. And I'm not criticizing that per se. That's very, very important to know all that stuff. But there's a massive missing component. And that massive missing component is answering the question, who cares? Because one of the things I started to notice as I was diving into this, in quotes, intellectual self-defense swimming pool and watching others do it online over a decade ago, right, is that there was this thing that started to develop of, really understanding fallacies and being able to call out somebody's fallacy when their argumentation was bad. You've committed such as the straw man fallacy, or there's no true Scotsman fallacy, or the poison well fallacy, or the blah, blah, blah. Well, all these fallacies. But what I found out in my personal interactions is that if you got someone who really wants to manipulate you, we'll call them a sophist. We'll define that at some point in the show. someone who really wants to
It's
manipulate
time
you.
for Declare Your Independence with
I'm
Ernest
sorry, I
Hancock.
Does that sound?
Believe me when I say we have.
Are you leaning on the switchboard?
Yeah, no, I touched something. I did it wrong.
Okay.
I apologize.
So-
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll restart that thought. So if you're interacting with someone who really, really wants to manipulate you, and you spot the fallacy and you tell them, aha, you have committed the fallacy. They don't care. Well, I mean, it's like, they're hitting you with a baseball bat, and you're like, aha, I have identified that you were hitting me with a baseball bat. And they're just like, yep, poof, right? And then, furthermore, because most people don't understand intellectual self-defense or formal logic on this level, if you have any sort of audience watching you, they're gonna be like, the guy's hitting you over the head with a baseball bat, and they're gonna be like, oh yeah, he's making a really good argument, and Dylan just doesn't know what he's talking about, and so he must be wrong. And as I grappled with this missing gap in my understanding, there was another resource that I was consuming at the time. We can go into it later if you want. I don't want to get down a rabbit hole, but was talking about these different ways that human beings communicate with each other. And to shorten this as much as possible, just look at the core two pieces that are relevant to this conversation. We're able to interact with each other in two basic ways. One is we can interact with each other, in quotes, emotionally, which is a win-lose interaction. Either I'm going to dominate you and you're going to submit, or you're going to dominate me and I'm going to submit. Or we can interact with each other on a win-win situation where we can put the facts on the table and figure out, okay, well, I want this and you want that, and here's the problem that you have and here's the problem that I have. Let's see if we can come up with a solution and talk this out and figure it out, and right? So the error that I was seeing is that people who want to be on win-win, because there's a massive swath. We can get into this psychologically. There's a massive swath of people who can't even conceptualize interacting with somebody on a win-win. Everything is win-lose, right? People who want to be win-win just get their asses beat against people who are win-lose. I mean, it's just, and it's not even like a fair fight, or it's just one side's asleep and the other side is just pummeling the side that's asleep. And to make things even more tragic, in quotes, smart people who are good at argumentation, who are good at having discussions, who want to be on win-win, when this happens, they seem to think that the solution is to try harder to make a better argument. And the realization that I had, and I could tell this, I remember the exact moment that this, the light bulb went over my head when I figured this out, is that if we have these two options, there are more than two options, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm just talking about two. If we have two options that you and I can interact with each other, there's win-win option and there's win-lose option. If these two come into conflict, I'm going to ask you a question. What happens?
I have no idea what happens. You got win-win, win-lose, and whoever's got the bigger gun wins.
Let's make it more realistic. You're trying to have a conversation with me about whatever topic, and I'm being manipulative and trying to get you to say something or get you to do something without providing a good reason why you should do it, right? I'm trying to humiliate you or whatever, right? You're on that, we'll call it circuit for now. I'm on the dominate circuit. How is this interaction going to go, and how's it going to end?
There's going to be confrontation. Apologize for your white privilege. I mean, whatever. I get it, but what? Go ahead and make your point.
Well, what I'm saying is that there actually isn't confrontation, because confrontation presumes that one side is fighting back. If one side is on it, the win-win side completely evaporates to the win-lose side. The person trying to be reasonable does absolutely nothing to the interaction that the person trying to be manipulative is putting on the person trying to be reasonable. let me put it this way, and like I said, we could totally flesh this out more. Imagine we're playing chess.
We're going to. Go ahead.
Okay. Imagine we're playing chess. What is chess? It's a game, and the game is defined by its rules. Like, oh, you got a board that looks like this. You set it up this way. There's these so many pieces. They go on the board like this. They move like this, and these are the rules that we move. That we take turns, or there's a certain amount of time, or there isn't a certain amount of time. And here's the way that you achieve winning in the game, right? So if you and I are both following the rules, we're playing chess. But if I were to start making up moves or putting pieces back on the board or moving twice in a row, are we still playing chess?
Now, I understand. Let me give you an example that may...
No, well, hold on. Let me finish my point. Obviously, we're not playing chess anymore. And what I'm saying is that people who are, in quotes, reasonable, what they will typically do when somebody starts making up rules and obviously cheating is they will lean back and go, I need to bring my best chess game to this. Otherwise, I got to really, really focus on playing chess really, really well so I can defend myself against this guy. Well, it doesn't do anything because you're not playing chess anymore, right? What you need to do is challenge the guy and say, wait a minute, we need to agree on the rules or you're making stuff up and I'm not going to play with you as long as you're making stuff up, right? The point that I'm making is that if the person's on this, I'll call it a lower circuit, and I'll explain why later. This lower circuit of manipulation, sophistry, fallacies, that sort of thing, against a person who's authentically trying to be reasonable, the person being reasonable will get nowhere. 0%. Like, multiply their efforts by 0, and the dominate, submit, manipulative person will steamroll them every single time. And my theory, my idea that I'm promulgating is, first of all, how to define that. The trivium, formal logic, and all that good stuff is an aspect of being able to define that. Then, once you've defined it, or once you've identified it, I should say, once you've identified it, what do you do about it? Because continuing to be reasonable is basically 100% chance of failure.
Well, I'm with you. So now what are you supposed to do?
Well, are we still doing the sales pitch at the beginning, or
yeah,
are
we got like 4 minutes. Now we got like 4 minutes. Go.
Okay, what you do is you get your boxing gloves.
Right.
So the key, and we'll explain how this works and how to do it, is you must, in quotes, drop levels. You need to go onto the win-lose circuit. Now, how you do that and your goal and how to go about that, that's a longer conversation. But as long as you stay on that higher level and say, I'm going to be reasonable, you are just getting pummeled in the face. And furthermore, sophistry, I guess I will define it in the sales pitch here. I'm going to define sophistry. Typically, sophistry is defined like, someone who tries to pretend to have an argument and to manipulate people, which is true, but I'm going to define it more clearly in these terms, which is to say someone who pretends to use logic, someone who pretends to be putting forth a win-win argument, but in reality is putting forward a win-lose interaction. Because whether they consciously know it or not, they know that you will lose by default if they can keep you reasonable. I'm going to pretend to be reasonable to keep you reasonable, so I get all the benefits of dominating you without any risk of you fighting back. And it's even juicier and more delicious if there's an audience, because the audience doesn't know any of this stuff, that if you figure out what's going on and say, I'm going to push back, the audience is going to turn around and blame you for starting the fight.
Yeah, it reminds me kind of a Charlie Kirk thing on the campuses kind of deal.
I haven't I watch it occasionally, like clips when it
kind
pops
of
up on Twitter, but I don't know enough to know his style.
He's trying not to, create an argument just to be able to make a point. The I wanted to bring this part in, just to kind of as an understanding.
Yes.
as you're dealing with people that are already set in their decision, man, they already got an agenda. They're not open-minded. They're not, wanting. They're not going to be swayed by facts or evidence or anything. It doesn't matter. And you sit down for a chess game with them. It's like you're playing chess with a 3-year-old. It's easy to beat them up. You win. You're going, but then they get mad, stand up on the chair, pull out a .45, pump 3 slugs in your chest, knock all the pieces on the floor, and say, "I win." I mean,
Right.
to even engage with these types of people, that's the first mistake.
Well,
Now, it's always good to have an audience.
I want to be clear. I think you're talking about intellectual self-offense. I'm talking about intellectual self-defense, and I'm not necessarily addressing this on a political level. Right? This applies to that. What I'm addressing this is on. I'm much more concerned about the people in your immediate life. These are your friends, your family, your coworkers. And I'll premise this. I don't know how much time we have in the beginning segment. I really had the opportunity to develop this because my family is so horrible. 90% of them I don't talk to anymore because I've applied what I've been saying. But my family's so horrible and so manipulative that I actually had the what's the word I want? The push to figure this stuff out.
Oh, so you're motivated. You're motivated by Thanksgiving dinner. You're going to Christmas. You want to make sure that
I'm not going to Christmas. I'm not. I don't need these people in my life.
Then you lost. You weren't able to do it right.
No. No. This is about who is manipulating you in your life, and how do you identify it? And once you've identified it, what do you do about it? And then, in my case. We can get into the full story of how I came to this and started applying it to the people I know. Once I figured this out and I started applying it to the people I know, everybody fell within 2 categories. The first category were people that kind of had to take a step back and go, wait a minute, I really need to reconsider how this dynamic is. I still talk to those people. The other people who were, for no reason, under the sun, any way, shape, or form, would stop attempting to manipulate me and take advantage of me. Those people are out. I have no time for them. I have no interest in talking to them. All they are is a suck of energy. I'm not talking about winning a political argument at Thanksgiving. I'm talking about having somebody control your thoughts and mind and actions and humiliating you in front of other people, in particular, to control how you are going to behave in the universe and essentially limit your mind. And I mean, if we want to get philosophical about it, it's a form of mental slavery that I want to teach you how to identify and what to do about. And in the most extreme case, there are some people you got to get away from. And in my case, a lot of my family fell under that category.